Kyle Morrison stood in the big ceremonial hall of Crossroads Station. Around him were objects from many different worlds. Tonight felt different from other nights. The Vakresh aliens had brought their special swords from their home planet. Each sword was very old and very important to them. The swords looked sharp and beautiful under the station lights. Kyle wanted to see one sword more closely. It had pretty writing on the blade that told a story. He reached out his hand slowly, trying to be careful. "Do not touch that with your hands." A voice came from behind him. It sounded angry. Kyle stopped. His fingers were very close to the sword. He turned around slowly. A young Vakresh warrior stood there with all four arms crossed. Kyle knew this meant the alien was very unhappy. The warrior's skin turned dark purple. Kyle had learned that this color meant anger. "I am sorry," Kyle said. He put his hand down. "I did not mean to be rude. I was looking at the beautiful work." "Kyle, you do not understand the blade," the Vakresh said. "You reached for a master's sword with hands that know nothing about real fighting. This is a very bad insult." Other Vakresh warriors came closer. They looked ready to fight. The human people nearby started moving back. They did not know what to do. Kyle kept breathing slowly. He knew his next words were very important. "You are right. I do not know your ways like I should," Kyle said. "I have studied your culture. But studying is not the same as living it. Please be patient with me." The warrior's skin turned even darker. "Patience? You give me words when you have done something wrong. My people answer such things in only one way." Another Vakresh stepped forward. This one was older and had marks that showed high rank. "Zektar, please." The human did not know. "We can teach him the right way." "No, Kelshan," Zektar said. "This human is their cultural worker. His job is to know our ways. Not knowing is itself an insult." He spread all four arms wide in a formal way. "I challenge you to fight with honor. If you say no, you show that humans are not worth our time." Everyone became quiet. Kyle felt everyone looking at him. Station Commander Linda Grant pushed through the crowd. Her face showed worry. "Wait," Linda said firmly. "We are not fighting over a mistake. Kyle is a diplomat, not a soldier." "Then he should not represent your people in warrior matters," Zektar said. "Or do humans send the wrong people to speak for them? That is even worse." Kyle put his hand gently on Linda's shoulder. "Commander, can I handle this?" Linda's jaw became tight. "Kyle, you do not need to prove anything." "I am not trying to prove anything," Kyle said quietly. "But I did give offense, even if I did not mean to. If their way requires an answer, saying no would make things worse." He looked at Zektar. "I accept your challenge. Please teach me the right way to do this, so I do not insult your ways again." A wave of surprise went through the Vakresh group. Zektar's skin became a bit lighter, moving from anger to something like satisfaction. "You accept?" Zektar seemed truly surprised. "Even knowing you will face a Vakresh warrior trained from childhood?" "I accept," Kyle said. "Not because I think I will win, but because I respect your ways enough to answer properly." Kelshan stepped forward again. "This is strange. Humans do not have our advantages. You have only 2 arms, slower speed, and your people have been in space for barely 100 years. Why would you agree to almost certain defeat?" Kyle smiled a little. "Because sometimes the right thing is not the easy thing. And because I truly want to learn from this. No matter what happens." Before anyone could speak, the crowd moved apart. A new person entered the hall. Every Vakresh in the room immediately bowed low in deep respect. The newcomer was very old by Vakresh standards. His skin showed the silver-gray color of great age. 2 of his forearms had scars from many battles. His eyes looked like he had seen more fighting than everyone else in the room. "I am Vorthal," the old one said. His voice carried easily through the silent hall. "I heard about a challenge to a human. I want to watch this." Zektar's skin became pale with shock. "Master Vorthal, I did not expect you. This is just a matter of honor." Not worth your time. Any challenge to a species new to our ways is worth watching, Vorthal said. He looked at Kyle with eyes that seemed to see very deeply. You are the human who accepted? Yes, honored elder, Kyle said, showing respect naturally. My name is Kyle Morrison. You know you will probably lose? Vorthal asked directly. I understand the chances are not good for me, Kyle said. But I believe understanding between our peoples is worth more than my pride. Vorthal's expression changed in a way Kyle could not read. Interesting. Very interesting. He turned to Zektar. You will do this fight in 3 days, in the arena, following all our traditional ways. This will be a formal challenge that all can watch. 3 days? Linda protested. That is not enough time. It is the traditional time for preparation, Vorthal said. During this time, the human can study our ways and prepare himself. If he wants to learn, we will teach him what honor requires. He looked at Kyle again. But know this, young human. Zektar is young, but he has trained for 20 of your years. The fight will not be easy. I understand, Kyle said. Thank you for the chance to learn. Vorthal's expression changed again. Kyle realized the old warrior was pleased. We will see what you learn, Kyle Morrison. We will see. As people left, Linda pulled Kyle aside. Do you know what you have done? Not really, Kyle admitted. But, Commander, if I had said no, it would have shown them that their bad ideas about humans were right. This way, at least we can show them who we really are. Or you get hurt proving nothing, Linda said. Kyle smiled. I have been training with swords since I was 8 years old. I might surprise you. Also, I do not think Vorthal expects me to win. I think he expects me to show something else. What is that? Character, Kyle said simply. That is what this is really about. Not winning, but how I face the challenge. Linda sighed. You better be right. I do not want to tell Earth why I let our liaison get hurt by a 4-armed alien swordsman. Kyle laughed softly. I will try my best to keep all my parts attached. Now I need to go. I have 3 days to prepare for the most important fight of my life. As Kyle left the hall, he did not see Vorthal watching from a dark corner. The old master's eyes followed the human with strong interest. What do you see, master? Kelshawn asked quietly, coming from behind. Possibility, Vorthal said. For 100 years, we have heard stories of human wins. Their victories over species that should have destroyed them. Their impossible survivals and unexpected solutions. I have wondered if these stories were lies. He paused. This human shows no show-off pride. He accepted a challenge he knows he cannot win, not to prove strength, but to show respect. That is the action of someone who understands what truly matters. You think he might give a worthy challenge? Kelshawn sounded doubtful. I think, Vorthal said slowly, that we may learn something important about these humans. Whether Zektar defeats him easily or struggles, we will understand this young species better. He smiled slightly. And I find myself curious about what a human swordsman might show us. Very curious. In his room that night, Kyle stood before his own blade. It was a simple longsword. Nothing fancy. Made by a master smith on Earth, using old methods. He had trained in many sword styles throughout his life, always drawn to the philosophy and discipline rather than fighting itself. Now he would face a warrior from a species that had perfected blade arts for 1,000 years. A warrior with 4 arms, faster reflexes, and a lifetime of training. Kyle drew the sword slowly, feeling its familiar weight. He moved through basic forms, letting his body remember the patterns learned over many years of practice. He was not foolish about his chances. The Vakresh had physical advantages he could not match. The training room Kyle had reserved was simple and useful. It had padded floors, mirrors on the walls, and enough space to move freely. He arrived before dawn station time. He could not sleep with the fight on his mind. He was not alone. Vorthal stood in the center of the room, looking at the space carefully. Master Vorthal, Kyle said, surprised. I asked to watch your preparation, the old Vakresh said. Your commander said yes. I hope you do not mind. Kyle put down his bag. I would be honored. Though I should warn you that my training might look weak compared to Vakresh standards. That remains to be seen. Vorthal sat down with all four arms in a meditation pose. Begin as you normally would. Pretend I am not here. Kyle nodded and started his warm-up routine. Basic stretches, joint movements, breathing patterns to center his mind. He had learned these basics many years ago, and they were still the foundation of everything else. After 20 minutes, he drew his longsword and began running through forms. He started with simple cuts and guards from German longsword tradition, then moved to flowing patterns from Japanese swordwork, followed by precise thrusts from Italian rapier work. His training had always mixed different styles rather than mastering just one. Vorthal watched in silence for over an hour. Kyle tried to ignore the old warrior's presence, focusing instead on precision and control. He practiced reading imaginary opponents, shifting his stance and guard to respond to attacks that existed only in his mind. Stop, Vorthal finally said. Kyle lowered his blade, breathing heavily. Yes, master? You have trained in many traditions, Vorthal observed. This is unusual. Most species choose one path and follow it completely. Human sword arts developed across many cultures, Kyle explained. Each tradition has different strengths. I learned from several masters who believed in understanding many approaches, rather than limiting yourself to one. Why? Vorthal stood, moving closer. Surely complete mastery of one tradition is better than partial knowledge of many? Kyle thought carefully about the question. I used to think that way. But I had a teacher who told me something that changed my view. He said that every sword tradition is trying to solve the same problems, just from different cultural backgrounds. By learning many traditions, you understand the deeper principles better. Interesting philosophy, Vorthal said. Show me your stance when you expect an attack from above. Kyle shifted into a high guard, blade angled to stop a descending strike. Now, show me a different stance for the same situation. Kyle moved smoothly into a different guard, this one from a Japanese tradition, positioned differently but serving the same defensive purpose. And another. Kyle shifted again, taking a European variation with the blade held closer to his body. Vorthal's skin color changed to a shade Kyle had learned meant deep thought. You can change between these different solutions without thinking? After enough practice, yes, Kyle confirmed. The principle is the same even if the execution differs. I can choose which response fits the specific situation best. We do not train this way, Vorthal said slowly. Vakresh blade mastery follows one perfect path, refined over centuries. We have decided there is one best solution for each combat situation. That makes sense for a species with 4 arms, Kyle said respectfully. Your physical abilities are different from humans. What is best for you might not work for us. So we had to develop different solutions. Vorthal was quiet for a long moment. You speak as if your physical limitations drove you towards something valuable rather than something worse. Limitations force creativity, Kyle replied. Humans have 2 arms and slower reflexes than many species. We could not rely on overwhelming physical advantages, so we had to be smarter about how we approached combat. We learned to be adaptable. Show me how you would defend against 4 attacks at once, Vorthal commanded. 1 high, 1 low, 1 from each side. Kyle frowned. That is not really possible to defend against with 1 blade. I would have to choose which attacks were the biggest threats and accept that some would get through. Exactly, Vorthal said. A Vakresh warrior with 4 blades can make such an attack. How would you survive? Kyle thought carefully, moving through the problem in his mind. I would not try to block all 4 attacks. I would move offline, changing the angle so that your attacks got in each other's way. Or I would attack into your defense, forcing you to stop some of your attacks to protect yourself. Or I would close distance fast, getting inside your reach where your multiple blades become harder to use together. He demonstrated each option slowly, showing how position and timing could reduce overwhelming force. Vorthal watched closely, his old eyes missing nothing. You think tactically rather than technically, Vorthal observed. You solve problems instead of executing perfect forms. Forms are important, Kyle said. They teach principles and build muscle memory. But in actual combat, you have to adapt to what your opponent gives you. No two fights are exactly the same. Vorthal's skin color shifted again, cycling through shades Kyle could not interpret. I have trained warriors for 80 of your years, the old master said. I have never heard a student explain combat philosophy this way. Vakresh tradition teaches that perfect technique, perfectly executed, will win against any opponent. That works when you are the strongest species, Kyle said carefully. Humans learned we could not rely on being strongest. We had to be smarter, faster thinking, more adaptable. Our sword traditions show that reality. The door to the training room opened. Zektar entered, followed by several other young Vakresh warriors. They all stopped when they saw Vorthal present. Master, Zektar said, making a formal bow. We came to watch the humans training. We did not mean to interrupt your time. You interrupt nothing, Vorthal replied. In fact, your timing is perfect. Zektar, show your opening attack sequence, the one you plan to use against Kyle Morrison. Zektar's skin became pale. Master, I had hoped to keep my strategy private. Do it, Vorthal commanded in a tone that allowed no argument. The young warrior drew his 4 practice blades. He moved through a complex sequence, with all 4 blades flowing in a pattern designed to overwhelm an opponent with speed and coordination. It was beautiful, technically perfect, and very deadly. Kyle could see how the attacks supported each other, creating situations where blocking one blade opened you to the others. Kyle Morrison, Vorthal said when Zektar finished. How would you respond to that sequence? Kyle studied what he had seen, playing it back in his mind. Your opening comes high with 2 blades, while the lower 2 sweep wide for leg cuts. The pattern relies on me trying to block the high attacks, which leaves me open to the low ones. Correct, Vorthal confirmed. How do you survive? I do not try to block, Kyle said. I drop low and move forward, going under the high attacks and inside the arc of the low sweeps. It is risky, because it puts me close to you, but it breaks the pattern and forces you to reset. Zektar's expression showed surprise. The other Vakresh warriors exchanged glances. Vorthal's skin color showed satisfaction. You saw the weakness in 3 seconds, Vorthal said. Zektar has trained that sequence for 2 years. It is considered perfect technique. It is perfect, Kyle said quickly. Against most opponents, it would be unstoppable, but it assumes the opponent will react normally. Humans have learned that unusual responses sometimes work when normal ones fail. Vorthal turned to Zektar. Do you see? This human, with 2 arms and slower reflexes, has found a counter to your perfected technique. Not because he is stronger or faster, but because he thinks differently than you expected. Zektar's skin darkened with frustration. Then I will use a different sequence, and he will adapt to that as well, Vorthal said. This is what I wanted you to see. Combat is not about executing memorized perfection. It is about understanding your opponent and adapting faster than they can. The human understands this by instinct. Are you saying I will lose? Zektar asked, his voice tight. I am saying the fight will teach you more than you expect, Vorthal replied. Win or lose, you will learn something valuable. He turned back to Kyle. Continue your training. We will watch. For the next 2 hours, Kyle worked through his preparation. He practiced reading attacks, shifting stances smoothly, and staying aware of positioning. The Vakresh warriors watched in silence, their expressions slowly changing from dismissive to thoughtful. When Kyle finally stopped, exhausted, Vorthal approached him. You train differently than I expected, the old master said. You spend more time thinking about problems than drilling perfect technique. Perfect technique is important, Kyle said, wiping sweat from his face. But perfect technique that does not adapt to the situation is just performance art. Real combat requires thinking. Your masters taught you well, Vorthal said. Perhaps too well for Zektar's comfort. He glanced at the younger warrior, whose skin still showed signs of being upset. But that is how we learn, through challenges that force us to grow. As the Vakresh group left, Vorthal paused at the door. Kyle Morrison, may I ask you a question? Of course, Master. Why do you truly fight? Not in this duel specifically, but in general. What draws humans to the blade? Kyle thought carefully about the question. I cannot speak for all humans. But for me, sword training was never about fighting. It was about discipline, about understanding myself, about respect for traditions that came before me. The sword is a teacher. It shows you who you are when everything is stripped away. Vorthal's skin color shifted to a shade Kyle had never seen before. Something between satisfaction and revelation. I have taught thousands of warriors, and you have just put into words something I have always felt, but never quite expressed. He bowed slightly. A gesture of respect. Whatever happens in the arena, I am honored to have met you. After Vorthal left, Linda Grant entered the training room. She had clearly been waiting outside. I saw them leave, she said. How did it go? The arena on Crossroads Station had been changed overnight. What was usually a space for games and community events now looked like an ancient dueling ground. The Vakresh had brought traditional decorations, banners showing the symbols of their warrior houses, and ceremonial weapons displayed on stands around the edges. Kyle entered through the Challenger's gate, wearing simple combat clothes that allowed free movement. His longsword hung at his side, the familiar weight oddly comforting. The arena was completely full. Humans, Vakresh, and people from a dozen other species had come to watch the duel. Commander Linda Grant stood near the human group, her face professionally neutral but her eyes worried. Kyle gave her a small nod to reassure her. Across the arena, Zektar came through the champion's gate. He wore traditional Vakresh dueling armor, lightweight but protective, and carried 4 blades, one in each hand. His skin showed the deep blue of focused determination. Behind him, other Vakresh warriors formed an honor guard, their presence a reminder of how much this duel mattered to their culture. Vorthal stood at the arena's center, positioned to oversee the duel. The old master's voice carried easily through the space, helped by the arena's sound systems. We gather to witness a challenge of honor, Vorthal began. Kyle Morrison of Earth has accepted Zektar's challenge to defend himself and his species' reputation. This duel will follow traditional Vakresh rules. The combat continues until one person yields, is disarmed, or cannot continue. Killing blows are forbidden. This is a test of skill and honor, not a fight to the death. Kyle felt relief at that explanation. He had studied enough Vakresh culture to know their duels came in different forms, some far more deadly than others. Kyle Morrison, Vorthal called. Approach. Kyle walked to the center of the arena, very aware of every eye on him. He stopped at the right distance from Vorthal and bowed respectfully. You understand the terms? Vorthal asked. I do, honored master. Do you enter this duel freely, with no force? I do. Then speak the traditional words of challenge acceptance. Kyle had memorized this part carefully. In the Vakresh language, he said, I face this challenge with honor. I seek understanding through combat. I will show my character through my blade. A murmur went through the Vakresh watchers. Kyle's pronunciation was not perfect, but his effort to speak their language showed respect. Zektar, Vorthal called. Approach. The young warrior moved forward, his movements controlled and precise. He stopped across from Kyle. Speak the challenger's oath, Vorthal commanded. I challenge to prove worth. Zektar said in his own language. I seek truth through combat. My blade will reveal what words cannot. The challenge is acknowledged, Vorthal announced. Participants, ready yourselves. Kyle drew his longsword, the blade catching the arena lights. Compared to Zektar's 4 weapons, his single blade looked almost weak. He moved into his ready stance, a neutral position that allowed equal response to attacks from any direction. Zektar moved into his opening stance, and Kyle recognized it from watching training footage. 4 blades held in a setup, designed to attack from multiple angles at once. "Begin," Vorthal commanded, stepping back. Zektar moved immediately, closing the distance with startling speed. His 4 blades flowed in the sequence Kyle had seen in the training room, too high and too low, designed to overwhelm through perfect coordination. Kyle dropped low and moved forward, exactly as he had described to Vorthal. He went under the high attacks and inside the arc of the lower sweeps, forcing Zektar to stop the sequence and reset. The young Vakresh's skin flickered with surprise. He had not expected Kyle to remember the pattern or counter it so precisely. He stepped back, thinking again. Kyle did not press forward. He returned to his ready stance, waiting. Rushing forward against a 4-armed opponent would be suicide. Better to defend and look for openings. Zektar tried a different approach, using his longer reach to test Kyle's defense with quick strikes. His 4 blades darted in from different angles, testing reactions and speed. Kyle responded by constantly adjusting position, using footwork to make himself a harder target. He did not try to block every attack, instead letting some pass by inches while blocking only the ones that posed real threats. His blade flowed from guard to guard, never staying in one position long enough for Zektar to commit to a full attack. The crowd grew quieter. This was not the quick victory many had expected. Kyle was still in the fight, still moving, still defending well. Zektar's skin darkened slightly with frustration. He increased his speed, pressing harder. His 4 blades created a web of steel that should have been impossible to defend against. Kyle gave ground, his footwork keeping him mobile. He noticed patterns in Zektar's combinations. The young warrior was very skilled, but his technique was precise because it was memorized. Each combination followed specific rules, specific changes. That meant Kyle could read ahead, guess the next move based on the current one. It was like reading a language. Once you understood the grammar, you could predict where sentences would go. Kyle suddenly changed his defensive pattern. Instead of giving ground, he shifted to the side, moving around Zektar's attack rather than backing away from it. The angle changed everything, turning Zektar's coordinated assault into a less effective series of individual strikes. Zektar adjusted quickly, but for a moment, he had to think about his position, rather than simply executing technique. In that moment, Kyle saw an opening. He did not take it. The opening was real, a brief weakness in Zektar's defense. Kyle could have scored a touch, possibly even ended the duel. But something made him hesitate. This was not about winning quickly. It was about showing respect, about demonstrating that he took this seriously. Vorthal saw the hesitation. Kyle caught a glimpse of the old master's expression and thought he saw approval there. Zektar recovered and pressed his attack with renewed intensity. He was fighting seriously now, treating Kyle as a genuine opponent rather than someone to be beaten quickly. His combinations became more complex, mixing fake attacks and real strikes, trying to overwhelm Kyle's ability to read his patterns. Kyle's arms began to burn with tiredness. Defending against 4 blades was exhausting. Every muscle protested the constant motion, the rapid adjustments, the split-second decisions about which attacks to block and which to avoid. He made a mistake, blocking when he should have avoided. The commitment left him open, and 2 of Zektar's blades came in from opposite sides. Kyle could not block both. He twisted desperately, taking a glancing hit on his shoulder from one blade, while barely avoiding the other. Pain flared, and he knew he was bleeding. "First blood," Vorthal called out, his voice cutting through the arena. Brief pause. Both fighters stepped back. Kyle pressed his free hand against his shoulder, feeling warm blood. The cut was not deep, but it was real. The Vakresh blades were sharp, even with blunted edges. A medical officer came to look at the wound, but Kyle waved them off. "It is not deep. I can continue." Vorthal studied him carefully. "Are you certain?" "Yes, honored master." Across the arena, Zektar's expression had changed. His skin showed a mix of satisfaction at drawing first blood and something else. Something like respect. "You fight better than I expected," the young Vakresh called out. "You are no master, but you are not unworthy either." "Thank you," Kyle replied. "You honor me with your skill. I am learning much from facing you." Zektar's skin color shifted again, surprise clear. "You thank me for wounding you?" "I thank you for taking me seriously enough to fight properly," Kyle explained. "That shows respect." A strange silence fell over the arena. The Vakresh watchers exchanged looks, their skin colors shifting in ways Kyle was still learning to read. Vorthal raised his hand. "Resume." The duel continued, but something had changed. Zektar fought with the same technical skill, but his approach had shifted. He was not trying to simply defeat Kyle anymore. He was testing, checking, trying to understand the human's abilities. Kyle adapted to the change, responding with his own tests. He tried techniques from different traditions, seeing how Zektar responded to unfamiliar patterns. The Japanese drawing cut seemed to confuse the Vakresh warrior briefly. The Italian thrust from an unexpected angle forced a defensive response that created openings. They circled each other, exchanging attacks and defenses in a pattern that became almost rhythmic. It was not the overwhelming assault of the duel's beginning. It was something more measured, more thoughtful. Kyle realized with surprise that they were communicating through their blades. Every attack asked a question. Every defense provided an answer. This was what his old master had meant when he talked about sword combat as conversation. Zektar seemed to realize it too. His skin color shifted to shades Kyle associated with deep thought. The young warrior's attacks became more exploratory. Less about overwhelming force, and more about understanding. They fought for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Both got minor hits, shallow cuts that showed skill without causing serious harm. Neither could gain a clear advantage. Finally, they both stepped back at the same time, an unspoken agreement that the current exchange had reached its natural end. Zektar looked at Kyle with new eyes. "You are strange, human. You fight as no species I have trained against. Your style has no consistency, yet somehow works. I do not understand it." "What? I adapt to what you give me," Kyle said, breathing hard. "Every opponent is different, so my responses must be different too." "That should not work," Zektar said, genuine confusion in his voice. "Combat requires perfect technique, practiced until it becomes natural. Your technique changes constantly." "My technique changes," Kyle agreed. "But my principles do not. I am always trying to control distance, keep balance, and understand what you are trying to do. How I show those principles adapts to the situation." Zektar stood silent for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He lowered all four of his blades. "Honored Master," he called to Vorthal, "I declare this duel ended. Kyle Morrison has proven himself worthy. I withdraw my challenge." Gasps echoed through the arena. Kyle stood frozen, unsure what had just happened. The celebration in the diplomatic quarters was quiet, but genuine. Kyle sat with medical foam treating his various cuts while human and Vakresh people mingled. The tension from earlier was replaced by curious conversation. The duel had done what weeks of formal talks had struggled to achieve. Genuine mutual interest. Kyle accepted congratulations with quiet thanks, but his attention kept going to Vorthal. The old master stood apart from the celebration, watching the interaction between species with those seeing eyes that seemed to notice far more than surface details. Finally, Vorthal approached. The conversations around them grew quiet. "Kyle Morrison," the old master said formally, "walk with me." It was not a request. Kyle stood, ignoring the protest from his shoulder wound. "Of course, honored master." They left the celebration and moved through Crossroads Station's observation corridors. Vorthal walked slowly, his old frame still carrying the grace of a lifetime warrior. They stopped at a viewport overlooking the station's central hub, where ships from dozens of worlds came and went in endless patterns. "What did you learn today?" Vorthal asked directly. Kyle thought carefully about the question. I learned that Vakresh combat philosophy emphasizes perfected technique. I learned that Zektar is a skilled warrior who had the courage to end a fight he was winning because he valued wisdom over pride. And I learned that your people value honor in ways that go deeper than simple victory. Vorthal's skin color showed satisfaction. Good observations. Now tell me what you truly learned. Kyle smiled slightly. I learned that I have much more to learn. Every exchange with Zektar showed me gaps in my understanding. His coordination with 4 blades created problems I had never faced. I adapted enough to survive, but real mastery would require years of study. Also good, Vorthal said. Humility in the face of one's limits is rare. Most warriors think too highly of their abilities. He paused, watching a ship dock in the distance. I want to test you myself. Kyle's heart beat faster. Honored master, I am not sure I understand. The duel today revealed something interesting about human approach to blade work, Vorthal explained. But Zektar, skilled as he is, has trained for only 20 years. I have trained for over a century. I have perfected techniques that younger warriors have not yet mastered. I want to see how human adaptability faces true expertise. 22. Master Vorthal, Kyle said carefully. I barely held my own against Zektar. Your skill must be much greater. I do not think I would last 10 seconds. Perhaps, Vorthal agreed. Or perhaps you would surprise us both. What you showed today was not better technique, it was better thinking. You read Zektar's patterns faster than he expected. You adapted to his style while he was still trying to understand yours. I want to see how you respond to techniques that no human has ever faced. Kyle looked at his bandaged shoulder. When? Tomorrow, if you agree. This would not be a challenge of honor like Zektar's. This would be a teaching exercise. I want to learn about human blade philosophy, and the best way to learn is through direct experience. You are sure about this? Kyle asked. I do not want to insult you by failing too quickly. Vorthal's expression shifted to something Kyle recognized as amusement. Kyle Morrison. I am 87 of your years old. I have trained thousands of warriors. I have faced blade masters from 6 species. Very little insults me anymore. He grew more serious. But I am genuinely curious. Your species is young to the stars, yet you have survived encounters with species that should have destroyed you. You must have some qualities that make up for your physical limits. I believe your blade philosophy reveals those qualities. What about Zektar? Kyle asked. Would this offend him? Zektar will benefit from watching, Vorthal replied. He learned today that victory is not the only measure of a warrior. Tomorrow he will learn what true mastery looks like, and how even mastery can be challenged by unexpected approaches. Kyle took a deep breath. Everything in his training told him this was a terrible idea. Vorthal was a legend, a master who had forgotten more about blade work than Kyle had ever learned. But he also understood what Vorthal was really asking. This was not about proving human superiority. It was about mutual learning, about 2 philosophies meeting in the most direct way possible. I accept, Kyle said, though I hope you will go easy on an injured student. Vorthal's skin showed genuine amusement. I will go exactly as hard as the situation requires. No more. No less. That is what teaching demands. When they returned to the celebration, Linda Grant immediately pulled Kyle aside. Please tell me you did not just agree to fight the galaxy's most legendary swordmaster, she said. I cannot tell you that, Kyle admitted. Because I did exactly that. Linda closed her eyes. Kyle, he is going to destroy you. Probably, Kyle agreed. But he is not trying to humiliate me. He genuinely wants to understand how humans approach combat. This is a learning opportunity. A learning opportunity that is going to put you in the medical bay, Linda countered. Maybe, Kyle said. But Commander, think about what this means. The greatest Vakresh Blade Master is interested enough in human techniques to face me personally. That is not an insult. That is recognition that we have something worth examining. Even if I lose badly, the fact that he is taking us seriously is valuable. Linda sighed. You are determined to do this? I am. Then at least promise me you will rest, and let your injuries heal before tomorrow. I promise, Kyle said with a smile. Though I do not think an extra day of healing is going to make much difference against someone like Vorthal. That night, Kyle reviewed everything he had learned about Vakresh bladework. He studied footage of Vorthal's few recorded duels, most of them decades old. The old master moved with a smooth grace that seemed to defy his age. His 4 blades wove patterns of devastating efficiency, each movement perfect, each transition seamless. Kyle also noticed something else. Vorthal did not just execute techniques. He adjusted them in real time, adapting to his opponents in ways the younger Vakresh warriors did not. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. Vorthal's perfected techniques were not rigid. They had flexibility built into their foundation. That gave Kyle something to work with. Not much, but something. He spent hours considering his approach. He could not match Vorthal's technique. He could not match his speed or coordination. What he could do was stay unpredictable, force the old master to constantly adapt, and look for any patterns in how Vorthal responded to unexpected situations. It was a thin hope, but it was something. The next day arrived too quickly. Kyle's shoulder still ached despite medical treatment, but he could move freely enough. He arrived at the arena to find it even more crowded than the day before. Word had spread that Vorthal himself would be demonstrating against the human. Zektar met Kyle at the entrance. "Are you prepared?" "As prepared as I can be," Kyle replied honestly. "Which probably is not very prepared at all." "Master Vorthal does not waste his time," Zektar said. "If he believes this exercise has value, then it does. Trust that." "I do trust it," Kyle said. "I am just not entirely certain I will survive it." Zektar's skin showed amusement. "Survival is not the point. Learning is the point. But for what it is worth, I believe you will surprise him." "You certainly surprised me." They entered the arena together. Vorthal was already there, preparing. He had exchanged his formal robes for traditional dueling clothes. In his 4 hands he held blades that gleamed like captured starlight, clearly weapons of exceptional quality. Kyle drew his own long sword, the simple steel feeling inadequate in comparison, but his old master's words echoed in his memory. "The sword is just metal. The swordsman is what matters." Vorthal approached the center of the arena. "Kyle Morrison, are you ready?" "Yes, honored master. Remember, this is a teaching exercise, not a duel of honor. We stop when I determine we have both learned what we need to learn. Understood?" "Understood. Then let us begin." Vorthal moved into his opening stance, and Kyle immediately recognized that it was nothing like Zektar's approach. The old master's position looked relaxed, almost casual, but Kyle could see the potential in it. The multiple threats contained in that simple setup. Kyle settled into his own ready stance, focusing on breathing and awareness. He would need every bit of concentration he had for what came next. "Begin," Vorthal said quietly. The old master's first attack was a thing of terrible beauty. 4 blades moved in perfect harmony, creating a pattern that seemed to attack from every direction at once. There was no obvious priority, no clear sequence. Each blade threatened equally, forcing Kyle to make impossible decisions about which to defend against. Kyle responded with pure instinct, his body moving before his mind could fully process the threat. He shifted offline, angling his body to reduce the number of attacks that could reach him at once. His blade moved in a tight circular pattern, deflecting 2 of Vorthal's strikes while his footwork carried him away from the others. He survived the first exchange by inches. Vorthal pressed forward, not giving Kyle time to recover. His attacks flowed like water, each one setting up the next, creating combinations that seemed impossible to defend against. Kyle gave ground rapidly, his entire focus narrowed to the immediate moment, reading the master's movements and responding with everything he had learned. Within 30 seconds, Kyle understood the basic truth. He could not defend against Vorthal's attacks using normal technique. The old master was simply too good, too perfect in his execution. Every traditional response Kyle attempted was anticipated and countered before he could complete it. So Kyle stopped trying to defend normally. He began moving oddly, abandoning the formal footwork patterns he had learned. He changed levels constantly, sometimes standing tall, sometimes dropping almost to the ground. He used his blade in ways that would horrify traditional instructors, sometimes treating it like a short staff for blocking, sometimes using it to help his position rather than as a cutting tool. It was messy, unrefined, and completely unpredictable. And it worked, barely. Kyle was not winning. He was not even truly defending. But he was surviving, forcing Vorthal to adapt to unexpected responses. Vorthal suddenly changed his approach. His attacks became slower, more measured. He was deliberately creating openings, testing whether Kyle would recognize them as traps or real opportunities. Kyle saw the tests for what they were. Each apparent opening came with a counter-response already prepared. Taking the bait would result in immediate defeat. So instead of attacking into the openings, Kyle used them to reset his position, buying himself precious seconds to breathe and think. "You recognize the traps," Vorthal said, approval clear in his voice. "Good. Many warriors with more experience than you would have fallen for those. Now show me how you would create an opportunity rather than simply defending." It was a direct challenge within the teaching exercise. Kyle understood that Vorthal wanted to see offensive thinking, not just defensive survival. Kyle took a risk. He deliberately moved into a poor position, appearing to make a mistake. He left himself open, as if tiredness had caused him to drop his guard. Vorthal's response was instant. All four blades came together on the apparent opening. At the last possible moment, Kyle dropped even lower than his already low stance and turned. The master's blades cut through air, where he had been a moment before. Kyle's longsword came up in a thrust toward Vorthal's center, not aiming for a hit but testing the master's response. Vorthal's counterattack was devastating. Two of his blades trapped Kyle's sword while the other two came in from angles that were impossible to defend against. Kyle released his sword and rolled backward, escaping the trap but losing his weapon. He came up empty-handed, breathing hard, covered in sweat. Vorthal held Kyle's longsword along with his own four blades. Disarmed. The exercise ends. Kyle bowed respectfully, hands on his knees as he caught his breath. "Thank you for the teaching, honored master." "You gave up your weapon rather than take certain hits," Vorthal observed. "Why?" "Because staying in the fight was more important than keeping one particular tool," Kyle explained between breaths. "If I had tried to hold onto my sword, I would have been struck multiple times. Giving it up let me stay mobile. But without a weapon, you cannot win." "I could not win with a weapon either," Kyle said honestly. Staying in the fight was never about winning. It was about learning as much as possible before the inevitable end. Vorthal's skin color shifted to something profound, a shade that seemed to show deep revelation. "In 87 years of training warriors, I have never heard someone explain that philosophy. Most fight to win or die trying. You fight to learn, and survival is simply a way to continue learning." "Is that not what combat should be?" Kyle asked. "Every encounter is information. Every exchange teaches you something. Focusing only on victory means you miss the lessons." The old master was quiet for a long moment. Then he handed Kyle's longsword back to him. "Kyle Morrison," Vorthal said formally, "I have learned what I needed to learn. Your blade philosophy is unlike anything in Vakresh tradition. Yet it has deep merit. You treat combat as communication, as mutual exploration rather than conquest. This is why humans surprise species that should defeat them. You learn faster than you should, adapt more quickly than seems possible. Because you approach every challenge as a learning opportunity, rather than a test to pass or fail." "I do not know if that is all humans," Kyle said carefully. "That might just be me." "Perhaps," Vorthal agreed. "But philosophy comes from culture, and culture shapes individuals. If your blade training taught you this approach, then your culture values it, and that makes humanity more formidable than strength or technology ever could." He raised his voice so the entire arena could hear. "Let it be known that I, Vorthal, recognize Kyle Morrison as a blade philosopher worthy of respect. His techniques are young and unrefined, but his understanding runs deep. There is much Vakresh warriors can learn from human approaches to combat. The arena erupted in applause. Kyle stood there, stunned, holding his longsword and trying to process what had just happened. He had lasted less than 3 minutes against Vorthal. He had been completely outmatched. He had lost his weapon and been thoroughly defeated. And somehow, that defeat had earned him more respect than victory over Zektar had. Linda Grant was crying when she reached him on the arena floor. "You magnificent fool," she said, pulling him into a careful hug that avoided his injuries. "You actually made this work." "I have no idea what I did," Kyle admitted. "You showed them who we are," Linda said. "You showed them that humans value learning over ego, that we are willing to face impossible challenges not to prove we are the best, but to become better than we were." That is what they needed to see. As celebrations began, Vorthal approached Kyle one more time. "Tomorrow," the old master said, "we begin formal philosophical exchange. You will teach me about human blade traditions, and I will teach you about Vakresh techniques. We will learn from each other, not as master and student, but as practitioners seeking deeper understanding." Kyle bowed deeply. "I would be honored beyond words, Master Vorthal." "The honor," Vorthal replied, "is mutual. It is not every day that one discovers an entirely new way of thinking about something one has practiced for a lifetime. You have given me a gift, Kyle Morrison, the gift of knowing that even after 87 years, I still have much to learn." The next morning, the private training hall Vorthal had reserved was much smaller than the public arena. Morning light from the station's viewports created long shadows across the padded floor. Kyle arrived early, his muscles sore from the previous day's duels but his mind sharp with anticipation. Vorthal was already there, meditating in the center of the room. His forearms were arranged in a complex position that Kyle recognized as a thinking form. "Good morning, honored master," Kyle said quietly. Vorthal's eyes opened. "Good morning, Kyle Morrison. Your injuries are healing well?" "Well enough," Kyle replied. "I will be tender for a few days, but nothing serious." "Good." Vorthal stood with smooth grace. "Today we begin the real work. Yesterday, I tested your responses to overwhelming force. I learned that you adapt quickly and treat combat as communication. Today I want to understand the foundations of your philosophy. Where does this approach come from?" For hours they talked and demonstrated. Kyle shared stories of human martial history, explaining how different cultures had approached the sword. Vorthal shared Vakresh, wisdom accumulated over centuries. They discovered that despite very different methods, both traditions ultimately sought the same thing: understanding through the blade. "Show me your highest technique," Kyle requested. "The peak of Vakresh blade mastery." Vorthal smiled and began to move. His 4 blades flowed in a pattern called the Infinite Dance, a technique so perfect it seemed to attack and defend simultaneously from all angles. It was the most beautiful, technically flawless thing Kyle had ever witnessed. When Vorthal finished, Kyle was in awe. "That was incredible. I have never seen anything like it." "This is what perfection looks like," Vorthal said. "Centuries of refinement. Countless masters contributing their insights, all combined into one ultimate form. This pattern cannot be defeated by normal means. It is, by every measure, perfect." "I believe you," Kyle said. "I do not think I could break through that defense with anything I know." "And yet," Vorthal said, his tone shifting, "after facing you yesterday, I find myself questioning something I have believed my entire life. I have always thought that perfection was the ultimate goal, that if technique was flawless, no opponent could win. But you survived against me yesterday not by approaching perfection, but by abandoning it entirely. How is this possible?" Kyle thought carefully. "May I speak honestly, even if my words might seem critical?" "Please do," Vorthal said. "I genuinely want to understand." "Perfection is powerful," Kyle began slowly. "But perfection in one context might not be perfect in another. That infinite dance you showed me is perfect for a 4-armed Vakresh warrior with your reflexes and training. but if I tried to perform it, I would fail immediately because I do not have 4 arms. He paused. What humans learned, through thousands of years of warfare against varied enemies, is that no single perfect solution exists. The perfect technique for one situation is different from perfect technique for another situation. Context matters more than absolute perfection. So you are saying our pursuit of perfection is flawed? Vorthal asked, curious rather than offended. Not flawed, Kyle said carefully. Your perfection is real and powerful, but it is perfection within a specific context. When you face something outside that context, something that does not respond the way your perfection expects, you have to adapt. And adaptation is harder when you have spent a lifetime perfecting one approach. Vorthal's skin color shifted through complex patterns. This is a deep observation. You are suggesting that humans give up perfection in favor of adaptability, and that this trade-off has real value. I would not say we give up perfection, Kyle replied. I would say we pursue a different kind of perfection, one based on understanding principles, rather than mastering specific techniques. We try to become perfect at learning and adapting, rather than perfect at executing predetermined forms. They continued talking and demonstrating late into the afternoon. Vorthal showed Kyle variations on the infinite dance, deliberately introducing imperfections to make it more adaptable. Kyle showed how different human traditions approached the same problems from completely different angles. Finally, as evening approached, Vorthal moved to a case he had brought. From it, he withdrew a blade unlike any Kyle had seen before. It was sized for human hands, but the blade itself showed unmistakably Vakresh craftsmanship. The metal seemed to shine with inner light, and flowing script covered the surface. This is for you, Vorthal said, presenting the blade formally. I commissioned it after our duel. The smith worked through the night to complete it. He held it out to Kyle. It is forged in Vakresh style, but designed for human use. The writing says, "Bridge between stars." It represents what you have accomplished here. You have built understanding between our peoples through respect, humility, and genuine desire to learn. Kyle accepted the blade with shaking hands. It was beautiful beyond words. Master Vorthal, I do not know what to say. This is too generous. It is exactly as generous as appropriate, Vorthal replied. You have given me new understanding after 87 years of believing I had learned all there was to learn. That gift is priceless. This blade is merely a symbol of gratitude and respect. Kyle drew the blade carefully. The balance was perfect, the edge flawless. It felt alive in his hands. I will treasure this always, and I will try to be worthy of it. You are already worthy, Vorthal assured him. Days later, when Kyle prepared to return to Earth, he carried more than just the magnificent blade. He carried detailed notes from philosophical discussions, new understanding of cross-cultural exchange, and a deep sense of satisfaction. Word of the exchange between Kyle Morrison and Vorthal spread quickly through diplomatic channels. The cultural significance was immediately recognized. A legendary Vakresh Blademaster had publicly acknowledged human martial philosophy as worthy of study. More importantly, both sides had shown that genuine learning could occur across species boundaries when approached with respect and humility. Commander Linda Grant found Kyle reviewing recordings of his training sessions with Vorthal. So, she said, sitting beside him, you came here as a cultural liaison. You are leaving as something that does not have a title yet. Bridge builder. Philosophy teacher. The human who taught a legendary warrior something new. I did not teach him anything, Kyle protested. We learned from each other. That is the whole point. That is exactly why this matters so much, Linda replied. You showed that exchange goes both ways. That humanity has something valuable to offer even to species with longer histories and more refined traditions. That is worth more than any trade agreement, Kyle smiled. I just tried to be respectful and open-minded. The rest happened naturally. That is your gift, Linda said. You make profound things seem natural. As Kyle boarded the transport that would take him back to Earth, he looked back at Crossroads Station where so much had changed in such a short time. The blade at his side felt warm, as if it held the memory of conversations and shared learning that had led to its creation. Bridge between stars. It was a heavy responsibility, that title. But it was also an honor. Recognition that he had helped two peoples understand each other better. Kyle settled into his seat, already thinking about how to share what he had learned. Not just the technical lessons about sword work, though those had value, but the deeper lessons about respect, humility, adaptability, and the courage to learn from those who seemed very different from yourself. The stars outside gleamed with infinite possibilities. If humanity could learn to engage with other species thoughtfully and respectfully, building bridges instead of walls, then perhaps the galaxy's future would be brighter than anyone imagined. Kyle closed his eyes, letting tiredness catch up with him. He had faced his challenges with honor, built something meaningful from potential disaster, and helped prove that humanity's greatest strength was not physical power or technology, but the simple courage to remain humble, curious, and open to learning from anyone, regardless of how different they might seem. The old master's skin color shifted through shades Kyle had never seen. Surprise, calculation, interest, all flowing across his features. As he processed what he was seeing, "Interesting," Vorthal said, his voice calm despite the intensity of the exchange. "You abandon form entirely when normal defense fails." "Form is a tool," Kyle gasped out between movements. "When a tool does not work, you find a different one. Most warriors become worse when they abandon form," Vorthal observed, his attacks never slowing. "They fall into randomness. You become more dangerous because your randomness has purpose." Kyle did not respond with words, saving his breath for the desperate defense. But Vorthal's words registered. The old master was not just testing Kyle's skill, he was analyzing, learning, understanding the philosophy behind the technique. Vorthal approached them both. "Zektar, you had the advantage. Why end the duel?" "Because I understand now what you wanted me to see," the young warrior replied. "This human does not fight to win. He fights to understand." Every exchange taught him more about my style, and he adapted faster than I could adjust. If we continued, I believe he would have found a way through my defenses eventually. Not because he is stronger, but because he learns faster than I expected. Kyle lowered his blade, stunned. "Zektar, I do not think I would have won." "Perhaps not," Zektar agreed. "But the purpose of the duel was to answer whether you showed proper respect and understanding. You have shown both. Continuing would serve no purpose except my pride, and pride is worth less than wisdom." Vorthal's skin color shifted to deep satisfaction. "Well spoken, young warrior. You have learned the true lesson." He turned to Kyle. "Kyle Morrison, the challenge is ended with honor. You have shown yourself worthy of respect." The arena erupted in applause. "Honestly, I am not sure," Kyle admitted. "Vorthal seems genuinely interested in how humans approach sword work, but I also think I might have made things harder on myself." Zektar looked pretty frustrated. "Maybe that is good," Linda suggested. "If he is emotional, he might make mistakes, or fight harder to prove himself," Kyle countered. "Either way, I have one more day to prepare. I am going to spend it reviewing everything I learned about their style and figuring out how to stay alive long enough to make this meaningful." "You really do not expect to win, do you?" Linda asked. Kyle smiled. "Commander, winning was never the point. The point is showing the Vakresh who humanity is, showing them that we take honor seriously, that we respect their traditions, and that we are worth knowing. If I can do that, even in defeat, then we have done something important." Linda shook her head. "You are either very wise or very foolish. I honestly cannot tell which." "Maybe both," Kyle said with a laugh. "Now if you will excuse me, I need to review combat footage of Vakresh duels. I have a feeling Vorthal gave me a gift today by showing me Zektar's opening sequence. I need to make sure I use it well." But Kyle had learned long ago that sword fighting was not just about speed and strength. It was about timing, position, and understanding. It was about reading your opponent and adapting to what you discovered. He had 3 days to learn everything he could about Vakresh fighting styles. 3 days to prepare for a fight that would be watched by people from many species. 3 days to show that humanity deserved respect, not through winning, but through character. Kyle continued his forms, his movements smooth and practiced. Whatever happened in that arena, he would face it with everything he had learned, everything he believed, and everything he hoped humanity could be. The real challenge, he thought, would not be winning. It would be showing the Vakresh that humans understood what honor truly meant. And that was a challenge Kyle meant to meet. No matter what happened,